Welcome to my YouTube channel, Value Quarter Dollar, Are Your Life. This week diving into the fascinating world of Sacagawea $1 value iconic design story hidden treasure Reese's. We explore the most valuable and expensive and ultra-rare U.S. coins, top 5 quarter dollar gold coins, history of coins, shocking America coins, and different color shade coin collector and investor P and DP. Mint mark coins, dirty condition, seemingly ordinary coins could be worth thousands dollar or even millions of dollars today. So before you spend that old, stick around because you might be holding a fortune in your hands. First up, one coins. Imagine reaching into an old jar of coins, pulling out a quarter that looks ordinary, dirty, scratched, and forgotten, and then noticing 4 tiny characters that suddenly make you stop. 1970D. At first glance, it is only a Washington quarter with a face value of 25 cents. But this particular date and mint mark have attracted collectors because some unusual examples contain varieties and mint errors that can be worth dramatically more than face value. The important thing, however, is to separate the genuine opportunities from exaggerated internet claims. A normal circulated 1970 D Washington quarter is generally not a $1 million coin, and simply finding the date does not make someone a millionaire overnight. The real excitement comes from exceptional condition, recognized double die varieties, or genuine mint errors. The 1970 D issue was produced at the Denver Mint in a huge quantity, about 417 million pieces, and it was made from copper-nickel-clad metal rather than the 90% silver composition used on older Washington quarters. Now, let us look closely at what makes this coin interesting. On the front, you will see the familiar portrait of George Washington facing left, with the word Liberty above him, the date 1970 below, and the motto "I in God we trust" toward the sides. The small letter D is the Denver Mint mark, positioned on the obverse near Washington's hair and ribbon area. That little D is extremely important when identifying the coin because it tells you where the quarter was produced. On the reverse is the American eagle surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, quarter dollar. The standard 1970 D quarter has a diameter of about 24.3 millimeters and weighs approximately 5.67 grams. Its edge is reeded, and its composition is copper-nickel clad over a copper core. Here is where the story becomes much more interesting. The majority of 1970 D quarters are ordinary coins. If your example is heavily worn, scratched, stained, or simply circulated for decades, its value may be close to its 25-cent face value. But collectors do not look at the date alone. They examine the coin's condition, strike, surface quality, die characteristics, weight, thickness, and unusual features. A coin that spent decades being carried in pockets can develop scratches, dents, discoloration, and worn details. Those problems generally do not make a coin rare. In fact, cleaning or polishing a dirty coin can make the situation worse because collectors prefer original surfaces, and harsh cleaning can leave permanent marks. So if you discover an old 1970 D quarter, one of the most important rules is simple. Do not scrub it, polish it, or put chemicals on it. The biggest mistake people make with videos about rare coins is believing that every old coin is automatically worth thousands or millions of dollars. That is not how the collector market works. A 1970 D quarter can be interesting without being a fortune. Current reference and auction information shows ordinary examples generally trade at modest prices, while exceptional certified specimens and genuine varieties can bring much higher amounts. NGC's published information identifies the coin as a Denver minted copper-nickel-clad quarter with mintage of 417,341,364. Its price information also demonstrates how strongly condition affects value. But now comes the part that can make a collector look twice: mint errors and die varieties. A mint error happens when something goes wrong during the manufacturing process, while a die variety is created by a particular die characteristic that can appear on multiple coins. These are not the same thing, and knowing the difference is extremely important. A normal scratch created after the coin left the mint is not a mint error. A strange mark caused by another coin hitting it is not automatically a double die. A dirty surface is not evidence of rarity. Genuine varieties require careful examination and, for serious value claims, professional attribution or certification. One of the most interesting 1970 D varieties is the recognized double die obverse FS 101. This variety has documented auction history. Great Collections reports that examples of the 1970 D Washington Quarter DDO FS 101 have sold from $56 to $953, depending on grade and example, with a PCGS AU 53 examples selling for $952.88. That is a real-world example why collectors pay attention to unusual 1970 D coins. Notice the difference between this and the sensational claim that every 1970 D quarter is worth a fortune. The premium belongs to the specific recognized variety, not to every coin carrying the 1970 D date. Another fascinating possibility is a double die reverse. Auction records include 1970 D quarters identified as double die reverse varieties, and one documented MS-66 example sold for $104 in April 2026. That kind of result shows how dramatically the market can change when a coin has a recognized variety and a strong certified grade. The ordinary coin and the unusual coin may look similar to someone who has never studied die varieties, but to an experienced collector, the diagnostic details can make all the difference. Then there's the category that really gets collectors excited: wrong planchet and wrong stock errors. A quarter is supposed to be struck on the correct quarter planchet. If a coin is accidentally struck on metal intended for another denomination, the result can be dramatically different in weight, thickness, size, or appearance. Documented auction records include a 1970 D quarter struck on 10-cent stock that sold for $408 in 2025, another struck on 5-cent planchet that sold for $396, and a 1970 D quarter struck on dime thickness stock that sold for $120. These are not ordinary dirty quarters. They are specialized mint errors with auction documentation. This is why the scale becomes so different when you move from an ordinary coin into the world of certified errors. One 1970 D quarter struck on 10-cent stock was recorded at $2,196 in a heritage auction sale in March 2026, according to the Gray Sheet auction records. That is an enormous jump from 25 cents, but it happened because the coin had a specific and identifiable mint error and was certified. The lesson is powerful. The valuable feature is not simply that the quarter is old. The valuable feature is that something unusual happened during production and that the market recognizes it. Condition is another major part of the story. Imagine two 1970 D quarters dollar. Coin number 1. 1978 Washington quarter, no mint mark. Is this ordinary 25 cents or a hidden treasure? Imagine finding an old quarter in a drawer, an inherited coin collection, a dusty jar, or even among coins that have been sitting untouched for decades. You pick it up, turn it over, and notice something unusual. The date says 1978, but there is no mint mark. Suddenly, the question becomes exciting. Could this ordinary-looking Washington quarter actually be worth far more than 25 cents? The answer is more interesting than you might expect, but it is also important to separate genuine rarity from exaggerated claims. A normal 1978 Washington quarter with no mint mark is not automatically a $1 million coin. In fact, the absence of mint mark is completely normal for a 1978 Philadelphia quarter. The Philadelphia Mint did not begin putting a P mint mark on regular quarters until 1980. So a 1978 quarter without a mint mark is not a minting mistake. More than 521 million 1978 quarters were produced at Philadelphia, which means ordinary circulated examples are generally common. But this is exactly where the story becomes fascinating. Even though the normal 1978 no mint mark quarter is common, collectors know that a coin's value can change dramatically when condition or a genuine mint error enters the picture. The coin is made from copper-nickel clad metal, not silver, with a standard weight of about 5.67 grams and a diameter of approximately 24.3 millimeters. That means the ordinary 1978 quarter does not have a large precious metal value hiding inside it. Its collectible value comes from preservation, varieties, and errors. So if you have a dirty example, don't immediately think that the dirt itself makes the coin rare. Dirt, scratches, discoloration, and damage usually reduce desirability rather than increase it. Now look carefully at the front of the coin. You should see George Washington facing left, the word Liberty above his portrait, the date 1978 below, and I am God we trust around the portrait. Because this is a Philadelphia issue, you will not find a D or S mint mark. That blank space where a beginner might expect a letter is actually one of the identifying characteristics of the coin. The reverse shows the American eagle with United States of America around the top, e pluribus unum above the eagle, and $quarter below. The design belongs to the classic Washington quarter era, before the major redesigns that came decades later. Here is the first major secret that every collector should understand. No mint mark does not mean error. This is one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding the 1978 quarter. If you search through a pile of 1978 quarters and discover one without a mint mark, you have not necessarily discovered a manufacturing mistake. Philadelphia intentionally produced quarters without a mint mark during this period. The first regular Washington quarters carrying the P mint mark appeared in 1980. Therefore, the absence of the P on a 1978 quarter is normal, not an automatic rarity. So, where can the real value come from? The first possibility is condition. Imagine two 1978 Philadelphia quarters produced from the same year's production. One was released into circulation and spent years passing from hand to hand. It became scratched, dull, worn, and dirty. Washington's hair lost some of its sharpness. The eagle's feathers became less distinct, and the fields developed contact marks. The other coin was carefully preserved shortly after leaving the mint. It still has strong original luster, sharp details, and very few marks. Both coins have the same date and no mint mark, but collectors may treat them completely differently. This is why coin grading is so important. A heavily circulated 1978 quarter may simply be a 25-cent coin. A beautiful uncirculated example can bring a premium, and the finest certified examples can command considerably more. One published auction record reports a 1978 no mint mark quarter graded MS-67 selling for $2,875 in 2021. That does not mean every 1978 quarter is worth thousands. It means that an exceptionally preserved example can be dramatically more desirable than the millions of worn coins that entered circulation. And now we reach the part that can make collectors extremely excited. Mint errors. A genuine mint error is different from ordinary damage. If a quarter is scratched after leaving the mint, that scratch does not make it a valuable error. If someone intentionally changes a color, polishes the surface, cuts the edge, or adds a coating, that is not a genuine mint error. But if something went wrong while the coin was being manufactured, the result can sometimes be highly collectible. One of the most dramatic possibilities is a wrong planchet error. This happens when the Washington quarter design is accidentally struck onto a blank intended for another denomination. Think about how strange that would be. The quarter dies are designed for a 24.3 millimeter quarter, but instead of receiving a normal quarter blank, the press accidentally receives a smaller blank intended for another coin. When the enormous pressure of the coin press comes down, the Washington design is transferred onto the wrong piece of metal. The resulting coin can be dramatically smaller, lighter, or otherwise abnormal. Documented 1978 quarter errors include strikes on dime, nickel, and cent planchets. These are the kinds of discoveries that can produce substantial premiums because the error happened during production rather than through damage afterward. Some published auction records have reported extremely high prices for spectacular wrong planchet examples, including a reported $14,100 result for a 1978 Washington quarter struck on a dime planchet. Because extraordinary auction claims should always be checked against the actual certification and auction record, the safest lesson is not to assume your coin is worth that amount simply because it looks small. Another fascinating error is a missing clad layer. A normal modern quarter from this era is constructed like a sandwich. The outside layers contain copper and nickel, while the center is copper. If one of the outer clad layers is missing, because of manufacturing problem, the coin can have a noticeably different appearance. One side may appear much more copper-colored than normal. To someone unfamiliar with coin manufacturing, this can look like a gold coin, a strange chemical reaction, or even an intentionally colored coin. But that distinction is coin number 2. Imagine finding a 1983 P. Washington quarter among old pocket change. It is only a 25-cent coin. It may be dirty, scratched, dark, or worn, and at first glance there may seem to be absolutely nothing special about it. But the 1983 P. Washington quarter has a fascinating story because collectors pay particular attention to high-grade examples and genuine mint errors. The most important thing to understand immediately is that a normal 1983 P quarter is not automatically a $1 million coin, and the letter P does not mean the coin is made of silver or gold. The Philadelphia Mint produced about 673,535,000 of these quarters, and the standard coin is a copper-nickel-clad quarter weighing about 5.67 grams. But don't let the enormous production number make you ignore the coin. This is where the real treasure hunting story begins. Millions of 1983 P quarters entered circulation, but most were handled, scratched, rubbed, dropped, and exposed to the elements. Finding one in truly exceptional condition is much harder than simply finding one dated 1983. That difference between an ordinary circulated coin and an exceptional mint state coin can be enormous in the collector market. PCGS recorded an auction result of $15,863 for a 1983 P quarter graded MS65, while other high-grade examples have also brought substantial prices. That does not mean your dirty quarter is worth $15,000. It means that condition and rarity can completely change the story of an otherwise common-looking coin. Now look at the coin itself. On the obverse is the famous portrait of George Washington, with liberty above his head, in God we trust beside the portrait, and the date 1983 below. The small P mint mark identifies Philadelphia. On the reverse is the American eagle surrounded by United States of America, E pluribus unum, and quarter dollar. The coin has a reeded edge and the familiar copper-nickel-clad appearance used for regular U.S. quarters during this period. It is not a gold coin, and it is not a silver quarter simply because it has an unusual color, or because somebody places a gold-colored sticker or coating on it. Here is something extremely important for anyone hunting 1983 quarters. The P mint mark itself is not the rarity. Philadelphia produced these coins in enormous numbers. The interesting question is what happened to a particular coin during production and what condition it remained in afterward. A heavily circulated quarter with scratches and worn details may be worth only its face value. A sharply preserved example can be considerably more interesting, and a genuine mint error can take the story into an entirely different category. One of the most famous varieties associated with the 1983 P. Washington quarter is known as the Spitting Eagle. The nickname comes from a raised line near the eagle's beak on the reverse, creating the appearance that the eagle is spitting. PCGS lists the 1983 PFS 901 Spitting Eagle as a recognized die variety. This is a fascinating example of how a relatively small die characteristic can turn an ordinary-looking quarter into something collectors specifically search for. The story behind a variety like this is fascinating because the feature is connected to the die rather than something that happened to an individual coin after it left the mint. When a die develops a characteristic, coins struck from that die can carry the same identifying feature. That is completely different from a scratch created when someone dropped a quarter on the pavement. A scratch is damage. A recognizable die variety can be collectible, and then there are the much more dramatic errors. One of the most extraordinary 1983 P discoveries is a quarter overstruck on an amusement token. According to published auction records, an example graded MS65 by NGC sold for $15,862.50 at Heritage Auctions in January 2014. The underlying token reportedly carried the words, "This is my lucky day," and other amusement token markings beneath the Washington quarter design. This is a kind of discovery that demonstrates why error collectors examine coins so carefully. It isn't the normal 1983 P quarter that brought that price. It was extraordinary manufacturing error. Think about how unusual that event would have been. A normal quarter planchet is supposed to be the correct blank prepared for a quarter production, but an amusement token somehow ended up being struck beneath the Washington quarter design. The result was a coin that combined two completely different objects into one fascinating numismatic piece. That is precisely the type of error that can attract serious collectors and auction attention. This is why you should never look at a 1983 P quarter and simply ask, how old is it? A better question is, what makes this particular coin different from the hundreds of millions of others? Age alone is not enough. A coin from 1983 is more than 40 years old today, but millions of examples were produced. What matters is scarcity, condition, variety, error status, demand, and authentication. Another area collectors examine is doubling. If you look closely at Liberty, the date, "In God We Trust," or reverse lettering and notice what appears to be a second image, don't immediately celebrate. Not every doubled-looking feature is a valuable double die. Coins can develop machine doubling, die deterioration, contact damage, and other effects that may look impressive under magnification, but have little additional market value. Genuine varieties need to be identified by their specific characteristics, rather than simply by the fact that something looks doubled. This distinction is especially important because the internet is full of photographs of supposed double dies that are actually ordinary mechanical effects. If you want to make a serious value claim, compare the feature with recognized variety references, or have the coin examined by an experienced numismatist or professional grading service. The more valuable the claimed error, the more important authentication becomes. Now, let's talk about the condition of your coin. Suppose you find a 1983 P quarter that is extremely dirty. You might think the dirt is hiding a valuable treasure underneath. That is possible in the sense that dirt can hide details, but the dirt itself does not create value. More importantly, do not aggressively clean the coin. Don't polish it. Don't scrub it with a toothbrush. Don't use vinegar, chemicals, or metal polish. If the coin turns out to be a valuable variety or error, cleaning can damage the coin number 3. Imagine reaching into an old jar of coins and pulling out a Washington quarter dated 1988. It is dirty, scratched, dark around the edges, and maybe it looks like nothing more than ordinary pocket change. Then you turn it over, examine the front, and notice the tiny D-mint mark. Suddenly, you have a question. Could this 1988 D. Washington quarter be worth much more than its 25-cent face value? The answer is yes in certain circumstances. But there is a very important distinction that every coin hunter needs to understand. A normal circulated 1988 D quarter is common and generally worth only its face value, while an exceptionally preserved example or a genuine mint error can be worth dramatically more. The Denver Mint produced approximately 596.8 million 1988 D quarters, so the date and D mint mark by themselves do not make the coin rare. The 1988 D. Washington quarter belongs to the familiar copper-nickel-clad era of American coinage. It weighs about 5.67 grams, measures approximately 24.30 millimeters across, and has a reeded edge. Its outer layers are copper-nickel over a copper center. In other words, despite the dramatic stories you may hear about gold coins, the normal 1988 D quarter is not a gold coin and does not contain gold simply because its surface might appear yellow, brown, orange, or unusual. Its collectible value comes from condition, varieties, errors, and demand, not from a hidden gold fortune inside every quarter. Now look closely at the obverse. George Washington faces left. Above him is Liberty, while "In God We Trust" appears beside the portrait, and the date 1988 sits below. The small D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. On the reverse, you will see the American eagle with United States of America around the design, E pluribus unum above the eagle, and $quarter underneath. These details are familiar to millions of Americans, but when collectors study a particular coin, every small feature can become important. Here is the first secret about the 1988 D quarter. The D mint mark itself is not rare. Nearly 597 million were made at Denver. That means if you find a worn 1988 D quarter in a cash drawer, coin jar, or old collection, you should not automatically assume you have discovered a fortune. The real question is what makes your particular coin different from the enormous number of ordinary examples that survived. And this is where condition becomes extremely important. Imagine two 1988 D quarters produced on the same day. One went directly into circulation and spent years moving through pockets, vending machines, cash registers, parking meters, and coin trays. It became scratched and worn. The other was protected shortly after production and survived with brilliant original surfaces and almost no contact marks. Both coins have the same date and mint mark, but their collector values can be completely different. The 1988 D issue is particularly interesting at the very highest grades. PCGS describes the coin as a surprisingly difficult issue to find in MS-67 condition and reports an auction record of $1,645 for an MS-67 example, sold by Heritage Auctions in January 2017. This is one of the most important facts to remember. That four-figure price was for an exceptionally high-grade certified coin, not an ordinary dirty quarter pulled from circulation. In fact, auction records show just how dramatic the difference can be. A certified 1988 DMS65 has sold for only a few dollars in older auctions, while MS66 and MS67 examples have brought substantially more. One gray sheet record lists a 1988 DMS66 PCGS example selling for $376 and an MS67 PCGS example selling for $1,645. Another MS67 example sold for hundreds of dollars. This tells us something extremely important about coin collecting. Grade can matter more than age. So if your coin is dirty and heavily circulated, don't become discouraged. Instead, inspect it carefully. Dirt does not automatically mean rarity, and scratches do not create value. In many cases, a heavily damaged quarter is simply worth 25 cents. But if the dirt is covering an unusually well-preserved surface or a genuine mint error, the coin deserves further investigation. And here comes one of the most important rules. Do not clean the coin. Do not polish it until it shines. Do not use vinegar. Do not use metal cleaner. Do not scrape the surface. Do not scrub it with a toothbrush. A valuable coin can lose desirability if its original surface is damaged by cleaning. If you believe your quarter may be unusual, the safest approach is to preserve it exactly as you found it and examine it carefully. Now let's talk about mint errors, because this is where the 1988 D quarter can become genuinely exciting. A mint error happens during manufacturing. It is different from damage that happens after the coin leaves the mint. A scratch from a key, a dent from a hammer, or a gouge caused by machinery years later is not automatically a mint error. A genuine mint error must be connected to the coin-making process. One of the most interesting documented 1988 D errors is a missing clad layer. A normal quarter has a copper-nickel outer layer over its copper center. If one of the outer clad layers is missing from the planchet before striking, the resulting quarter can look dramatically different. The exposed copper can give the coin a reddish or copper-colored appearance on one side. That unusual appearance can make people think they have discovered a gold coin, but the reality is much more interesting. The coin may have a genuine manufacturing problem involving its clad construction. A documented 1988 D quarter with a missing obverse clad layer weighed approximately 4.8 grams, significantly below the normal 5.67 gram specification, and one such example sold for $156 at Heritage Auctions in 2020. This is a real example of how a specific mint error can transform a normal denomination into a valuable collectible. But remember, color alone is not proof. A quarter can turn copper-colored because of environmental exposure, chemicals, heat, corrosion, or other post-mint causes. If someone tells you that a reddish 1988 D quarter is automatically worth thousands, be skeptical. The physical characteristics of a genuine missing clad layer error need to be examined carefully. Another possibility is an off-center strike. During normal production, the blank planchet should sit correctly between the dies. If it shifts, the design can be struck away from the center. A dramatic example may have a large blank area on one side and a visibly displaced design. Coin number 4, 1994, D Washington quarter. Could this ordinary 25-cent coin hide a valuable secret? Imagine reaching into an old jar of coins and pulling out a Washington quarter that looks completely ordinary. It is dirty, perhaps scratched, dark around the edges, and after a quick glance you see the date 1994. Then you notice the small D mint mark. Suddenly, that 25-cent coin becomes interesting. Could this be one of those Washington quarters that collectors are willing to pay serious money for? Could something hidden beneath the dirt make it worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? The answer is that a normal 1994 D quarter is common, but certain exceptional examples can become genuinely valuable. More than 880 million 1994 D quarters were struck at the Denver Mint, so the date and D Mint mark alone do not make the coin rare. However, the highest grade survivors are much harder to find, and PCGS recorded an auction result of $1,500 for an MS-67 example. PCGS +1. The first thing to understand is exactly what you are holding. The 1994 D Washington quarter is part of the copper-nickel-clad era of American coinage. It is approximately 24.30 millimeters in diameter and weighs about 5.67 grams. Its outer layers contain copper and nickel surrounding a pure copper center. So despite the dramatic story sometimes attached to old coins, a normal 1994 D quarter is not a gold coin and does not contain gold simply because the surface looks yellow, orange, brown, or golden. A strange color can come from dirt, toning, environmental exposure, chemical alteration, or other causes. The color alone cannot prove that a coin contains precious metal. PCGS. Now look at the front of the coin. You should see George Washington facing left, the word liberty above his portrait, "In God we trust" beside him, and the date 1994 below. The small d identifies the Denver Mint. Turn the coin over and you'll find the American eagle surrounded by United States of America, e pluribus unum, and quarter dollar. To most people, these are familiar designs found on ordinary American pocket change. But to a collector, every part of that coin can provide evidence about its condition, production, and possible abnormalities. Here is where the story gets really interesting. More than 880 million examples were produced, yet PCGS describes the 1994 D as a much tougher coin in the very highest mint state grades. Its published information estimates roughly 100 known examples around MS-66 and fewer than a dozen at MS-67. That is an incredible contrast. The mint produced hundreds of millions of quarters, but only a tiny fraction survived in truly exceptional condition. This is why a coin can be common overall, while simultaneously being scarce at the highest grade. PCGS +1. Think about what happened to these quarters after they left the mint. Most went directly into circulation. They traveled through cash registers, pockets, vending machines, banks, parking meters, drawers, and countless hands. They rubbed against other coins and hard surfaces. They developed scratches and contact marks. Some were bent, dropped, stained, cleaned, or damaged. Over 3 decades later, finding a 1994 D quarter with nearly flawless original surfaces is much more difficult than finding a worn example. That is why condition is one of the biggest secrets of this coin. A heavily circulated 1994 D quarter is generally just a 25-cent piece, but coin that remains brilliant, sharply struck, and almost untouched can attract collectors. At the very top of the grading scale, the difference can become dramatic. PCGS's documented $1,500 auction record for an MS-67 example shows that an exceptional 1994 D quarter can sell for far more than its face value. PCGS. But there is an important warning here. Do not take that $1,500 auction result and assume every 1994 D quarter is worth $1,500. That price belongs to a specific coin in a specific certified grade. A dirty, scratched, circulated quarter is not equivalent to an MS-67 coin. The difference between ordinary and exceptional condition is enormous in modern Washington quarters. Now imagine that your coin is dirty. Perhaps it has black material around the letters. Maybe it has brown patches. Maybe the surface looks dull and lifeless. You might think there could be something valuable underneath all this dirt. That is possible in the sense that dirt can hide details, but dirt itself does not create rarity. Scratches and damage do not magically increase the value of a coin. And this is one of the most important things you should remember. Do not clean the coin. Don't use vinegar. Don't use lemon juice. Don't use metal polish. Don't scrub it with a toothbrush. Don't scrape the surface. Don't try to make it shine. If your coin turns out to have a valuable variety or error, aggressive cleaning can permanently damage its original surface and hurt its collector appeal. Instead, hold the coin carefully by the edges and inspect it under good lighting. Look at Washington's portrait. Study Liberty. Examine the date. Look closely at the demint mark. Then turn it over and study the eagle, lettering, and edge. You're looking for something that can be explained by the manufacturing process, not simply something that looks strange. And now we come to one of the most exciting possibilities: mint errors. A genuine mint error happens during production of the coin that is completely different from damage that happens later. If someone scratches a quarter with a knife, that is damage. If it gets crushed by a machine years after leaving the mint, that is damage. If someone plates it with another metal or paints it gold, that is an alteration. But if something goes wrong while the mint is manufacturing the coin, the result can become a collectible error. The 1994 D issue has documented examples of unusual errors. Auction records include a 1994 D quarter with a missing reverse clad layer, as well as examples involving curved clips and off-center strikes. One published gray sheet record shows a 1994 D quarter with a missing reverse clad layer selling for $212, while another missing clad layer example sold for $59. These are excellent examples of why the exact error, condition, and authentication matter. Gray sheet, a missing clad layer, distinguish it from ordinary discoloration or chemical alteration. You need evidence, not just color. Another possibility is an off-center strike. Coin number 5.